Spooky season is almost upon us, so it's only right that we look at some spooky lore. Ghosts! Why are there ghosts in the Exiled Lands? In this episode of Raw Lore, we'll be finding out, so strap in, grab a suitably spooky beverage, and let's get started with these ectoplasmic entities. So, what are these ghosts? They're echoes of the past, in a way. These ghosts are actual people who once traversed the Exiled Lands, but I'm sure that isn't surprising to hear. However, they're also not quite our traditional haunting-style ghosts. Why? Well, let's look at their behaviour for starters. When we think of traditional ghosts, they hang around for a reason. That might be unfinished business, the way they died, or something along those lines, but they have a conscious and active effect on the world. These ghosts, however, do not. In fact, some of the ghosts are still alive. That being said, there are two ghosts that do interact with the world. The first is Thorgar the Blacksmith, a long-dead Sumerian in the Mounds of the Dead who can sell you the Pride of a Seer recipe after a short quest. The other is of course the Archivist, whose soul basically seems trapped in the archives, likely because of how intangibly tied he was in life to the documents within that location. There may be a few others I'm forgetting, but those are the main two that jump out. These are pretty much traditional ghosts. They're able to speak to and interact with the player because they have something keeping them tied to this world. For Thorgar, it's the link to his kin and his recipe tablet, and for the Archivist, it's managing and organising the archives, even though the Archivist does appear as a non-interactable ghost elsewhere. The ghosts we actually want to know more about don't really interact with the player at all. They can teach the player things, but it's more a task of observation. Aside from that, they just kind of do things. It's almost like we're watching them do things when they were alive, as opposed to it being an actual ghost doing things in the present. Why is that? Well, like most strange things in the Exiled Lands, someone's responsible. Any guesses who it might be? Anyone? Any ideas? Yeah, it's the Giant Kings. The slave bracelets, as we already know, were created to allow the Lemurians and the Giant Kings to communicate, and then changed to turn the Cursed Wall into basically a death zone. However, it seems the bracelets have, intentionally or otherwise, recorded the past. How do we reach that conclusion? Well, firstly, let's cast our mind back to the Keystone video, episode 3 of Raw Lore, for just a moment. In that episode, we established that the Keystone uses not necessarily just the physical form of artifacts in its creation, but rather their inherent and unique energy. You could make, theoretically, a perfect replica of those artifacts, but I highly doubt it you could create a Keystone with it, as they would not have the same energy. I don't think it's outside the realm of belief that the slave bracelets, which the Keystone unlocks, also ends up sucking up some of that energy over time. There's no solid evidence that says this is for sure what happens, but I do have some pretty compelling testimony. Arcos the Wanderer. Oh boy, Arcos is a really interesting character in the lore. Most people will know him from his mention of the amber-gemmed bracelets outside the Cursed Wall. That's a topic for another time, and that one is going to take a lot of research. Anyway, there is another line of dialogue that pretty much solves this mystery for us.
Bracelets? You can't remove them. Saw one fool cut his arm clean off trying to get rid of it. He bled to death right there in the sand. Nasty business. Leave it on. You'll start to hear the voices soon enough, and then you'll start seeing the ghosts. I don't think the voices are for us. Not for us here and now. I think they were talking to somebody else. Back then. Wherever it was. Whenever it was.
The slave bracelet essentially acts as something of a recording device. We know that both the Giant Kings and the Lemurians had this capability, as the lore stones are also basically recordings. Magical MP3 files, if you will. It seems the slave bracelets have recorded important moments in the lives of whomever is depicted. The betrayal of the Archivist, the journey of the harlot, the drowned ghost in the river, Sarnas and Braga's journey north, and so on. I highly doubt the slave bracelets were intended to record these events, but it seems to have been a byproduct of their creation. If it was intentional, I would have no doubt it would have proved incredibly useful in the Lemurian uprising for the Giant Kings, but likely also wouldn't have captured the lives and deaths of people eons after the demise of the Giant Kings. I believe it's Rasma recalling the memories of the Witch Queen who mentions the death weave hidden within the sorcery of the slave bracelets. However, aside from Arcos' own interpretation, I couldn't find any mention of the slave bracelets having a deliberate incantation to record things. They most certainly were not intentionally designed as a magical GoPro from what I can tell. So to bring all our information together, why are there ghosts in the Exiled Lands? Well, the slave bracelets were created for communication and then enslavement, but it seems that they have acquired the unintended consequence of essentially recording the activities of those that wear it. As hundreds, if not thousands of prisoners have lived and died within the Exiled Lands, the essence of their lives has been captured within the bracelet, which has, I presume, something of a hive mind or a shared knowledge base, which likely comes from the communication component. This is what permits exiles to see the ghosts of those long past, but even the ghosts of those still alive yet not interact with them, as they are essentially just recordings. If an exile were to remove their bracelet successfully, they would see no ghosts, aside from Thorgar and the Archivist. And there we have it, a short and sweet episode of Raw Lore where we've looked into the history and reason for the ghosts behind the Exiled Lands. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. The contents of this episode were definitely much simpler than some of the other Raw Lore ones we've done. This is where I like to dive into pretty deep lore topics, but this one worked itself out fairly simply. If you have any alternative theories for the topic of today's video, do let me know in the comments. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.